Welcome, dear listeners, to Family Shadows. Here, we share stories that speak not just of family conflicts, but of the quiet sacrifices, the hidden wounds, and the unexpected lessons that shape the bonds between parents and children. If you believe that every family carries both light and shadow, and if you want to journey with us through these heartfelt tales, please take a moment to subscribe. It helps us bring more stories like this one to you, and it lets these lessons echo a little further into the world. Today's story is titled, "My Daughter Maxed Out My Credit Card, so I Taught Her About Debt the Hard Way." Raymond Pierce was 64 years old, though if you looked at him from across the street, you might have guessed a little younger. He still carried himself with the kind of posture that belonged to a man who had worked with his hands all his life. Upright, steady, not proud but firm. His hair had gone gray at the edges, the kind of gray that looked like frost resting on the shoulders of autumn leaves, but his eyes were alive, clear and unflinching. Those eyes had seen labor and love, sacrifice and solitude. They had seen bills stacked on the kitchen counter, hospital rooms where his late wife had once fought bravely against the sickness that claimed her, and birthday cakes he tried to bake alone when his daughter was little. Raymond was not a flashy man. He lived in a modest home just outside of Columbus, Ohio. A two-bedroom house that carried the faint scent of cedar because he still polished the wood floors himself every month. His neighbors knew him as polite, steady, the kind of man who waved when he took the trash to the curb. If he ever borrowed a tool, he returned it cleaner than he found it. He was a man whose greatest pride was not in things, but in people, specifically in his daughter, Natalie. Natalie Pierce was 28 years old, smart, and bright in the way that young people can be when the world still seems like it will always make room for them. She worked in marketing at a downtown firm, a job that had her dressed in sharp blouses, carrying sleek handbags, and walking with the kind of stride that comes from knowing you belong in glossy glass-windowed buildings. To Natalie, appearances mattered. They weren't everything, but they were a lot. She believed the world judged you by the shine of your shoes, the label on your bag, the newness of your phone. And while she loved her father, she sometimes looked at him the way children often do when they have grown past the shadows of their parents' sacrifices. Grateful, yes, but also quietly embarrassed. Raymond never blamed her for that. He had been her age once. He had wanted to impress people once too. But still, every time he saw her scrolling through online shops or returning from the mall with another bag swinging from her arm, he felt a small pit in his stomach. It wasn't judgment, it was worry. Because Raymond knew what credit card debt really was. He carried one credit card, just one. He had gotten it long ago when Natalie was still a child, not because he wanted to buy things he couldn't afford, but because life is unpredictable. When Linda, his wife, was still alive, they had agreed that the card was for emergencies only. A car repair, a hospital bill, the kind of expense that couldn't wait. He treated it with reverence, as if it were a fire extinguisher locked behind glass. You never broke it unless you had no other choice. And because of that discipline, the card had remained mostly untouched. Each month he paid it off in full, even if it was just a grocery bill or a tank of gas. He never carried debt forward. He never paid interest. For Raymond, interest was a punishment for impatience, and patience had been his greatest companion all his life. Natalie, however, had grown up in a different era. She had watched her friends swipe their cards for dinners, for vacations, for clothes that shimmered on social media posts. She believed in buying now and figuring out the rest later. And though Raymond had tried to warn her, the lessons of a father often sound like old tunes to young ears, familiar but easy to ignore. On the mantel above the fireplace, beside a framed photo of Linda holding Natalie as a baby, sat Raymond's worn leather wallet. Inside that wallet was the card, silver, simple, without the fancy perks or airline miles that others bragged about. To Raymond, it was just a tool. To Natalie, on the few occasions she had glimpsed it, it shimmered like possibility. It happened slowly at first. A rideshare charge here, a small purchase there. Natalie had, without her father knowing, memorized the numbers. Maybe it began with a pair of shoes she swore she needed for work, or a dinner she didn't want to miss. She told herself it was temporary, that she'd pay it back before he noticed. But one charge leads to another, and like drops of rain gathering into a flood, the little things grew into something larger. Raymond, in his quiet way, didn't notice right away. He wasn't the kind of man who checked his account every morning on his phone. He still opened envelopes, still read the paper statements when they arrived once a month. And until that day, the envelopes had always been ordinary. But on one particular afternoon, as the late sunlight poured across his kitchen table, he opened the latest bill and paused. His eyes moved down the page. Designer boutiques, electronics stores, online retailers, restaurants he'd never stepped into. The charges weren't his, they couldn't be his. And yet there they were, lined one after another, a list of wants disguised as needs, a record of someone else's appetite. The total at the bottom nearly made his heart skip. $12,000. $12,000. For Raymond, that was more than just numbers. It was months of work, months of careful budgeting, months of choosing what not to buy. He closed the envelope and set it down. He sat back in his chair. For a moment, the house was too quiet. In the stillness, he could almost hear Linda's voice, calm and steady. "Don't raise your voice, Ray. Raise your daughter." That night, as Natalie breezed in from work with her heels clicking on the floor and a bright new handbag on her arm, Raymond watched her carefully. He didn't say anything yet. He simply watched the ease with which she moved, the way she set her bag on the counter, the casual kiss she gave him on the cheek. He wondered if she knew that he knew. He wondered if she felt the weight of the debt, or if it sat on his shoulders alone. Raymond Pierce was a quiet father, but quiet doesn't mean blind. And as he sat in the living room that night, the silver credit card resting heavy in his wallet, he realized that the time had come for a lesson. Not a lecture, not an angry outburst, but a lesson, the kind that would shape not only his daughter's future, but perhaps her character. Because debt, he knew, was not just about money. Debt was about choices, and choices, if you weren't careful, could follow you like shadows. The morning after the bill came, Raymond woke before the sun. He always did. Habit had shaped him that way. Coffee at 5, porch by 5:15. A slow look at the street waking up. Garbage trucks groaned through the cul-de-sac. A runner waved. The maple across the road wore its green like a promise. He held the envelope in his hands the way a man might hold a letter from a doctor, not ready to read it again but unable to set it down. He laid the statement flat on the kitchen table, drew a pencil line under the total, and wrote the number out in words as if naming it might shrink it. $12,324.18. Then he pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer. He had always believed in paper when it came to money. Paper slowed you down. Paper made you see. He copied the first charge, a boutique on High Street, the date, the amount. Then the next, online electronics, headphones with a price that could pay a month's rent in some towns. Restaurant names he didn't recognize. A subscription to something slick and streaming full of content he would never watch. A second page. A third. He wrote until his hand cramped. He circled 4 stores he knew were in the same mall on the north side. If you wanted answers, sometimes you had to walk to them. He closed the notebook, slipped the statement and card into his wallet, and drove. The mall at 9 in the morning was a cavern before the lights came up fully. Cleaning crews moved like quiet ghosts. Security rolled by in a slow cart. He paused at the map, though he didn't need it, the way you pause at old places to notice what has changed. The boutique he wanted sat between a fragrance store and a shoe shop with low lights and soft leather chairs. Luca and Lane, the sign said in clean letters. Inside, a young woman with a tidy ponytail and a name tag that read Hannah greeted him with a practiced warmth. "Good morning. Can I help you find something?" Raymond took his wallet out like a man taking out a photograph. "I'm hoping you can help me with a question if you're able. I saw a charge on my card." He slid a photocopy of the line item across the counter, not the statement itself. He'd made the copy at the office supply store beside the mall before he walked in. "I'm not here to complain, ma'am. I just need to understand what happened." Hannah glanced at the paper, then at him, sympathy in the way her eyebrows softened. "I'm afraid I can't share customer information, sir." She waited a beat, then added gently, "But I can tell you it was a very busy weekend. Lots of graduation and promotion gifts." He thanked her anyway. He was not there to trap anyone. As he turned to go, the manager appeared from the back carrying a stack of folded tissue paper. "Everything all right, Hannah?" The manager looked older, someone closer to his world. She smiled at Raymond, the kind of smile you trade when you both understand that life is longer than the script of a store's policy. "Sir," she said, "I'm just trying to figure out if a purchase was made with my card. I won't ask details." He gave a small shrug. "I'm a dad, that's all." The manager's eyes flicked to his photocopy. "We can't confirm names, but I can tell you we had an order with a gift note last week." She chose her words as if crossing a stream on stones. The note said for the next chapter, "Love, Dad." Sometimes people write notes they don't pay for. The person paying and the person gifting, it isn't always the same. Raymond took that in the way a tree takes wind, leaning, not breaking. He thanked them both, left, and sat on a bench in the corridor, watching the escalator move no one for a moment. For the next chapter, "Love, Dad." It sounded like something he would write if he had made that purchase. It sounded like something a daughter would write to herself if she wanted to pretend. He visited the electronics store next, a place with televisions that made skin look more alive than it does in person. A young man in a black polo asked if he needed help, and Raymond, never good at lying, told another small truth. "I'm trying to understand a charge." The clerk tapped at a screen, shook his head. "Corporate, sir. I can't pull it up without an order number." He was polite. He couldn't help. Raymond thanked him anyway. He walked the mall's loop twice, not because he needed to, but because walking turns thoughts into manageable pieces. He passed a kiosk selling phone cases and caught his reflection. Older, yes, but still a man his wife would recognize. He put a hand on his chest where the wallet rested. He could dispute the charges, call the bank, use the right words and make the numbers shift to zero like magic. But some magic left a stain. Fraud would fix the ledger and harm the lesson. He thought of Linda again. "Don't raise your voice, Ray. Raise your daughter." He was not in the business of punishing his child. He was in the business of growing her. By late morning, he was at the credit union. He chose the credit union because it still felt like a room where people knew your name. The woman behind the counter, a cheerful person with holiday earrings no matter the month, greeted him. "Hi, Mr. Pierce. How are the tomatoes this year?" He always brought in a few when his garden overflowed. "Coming along," he said. He slid the card through the slot. "I need to place a temporary hold on my limit." He could have said lower it. He could have said freeze it. But he liked the idea of limits being held, like a hand you squeeze across the table to steady it. The banker, her name was Lori, he remembered now, tilted her head. "Everything okay?" "I think I let something get away from me," he said. "I'm going to catch it." She typed. "We can set your limit to 1,000 for the next 90 days and put a note to notify you of any attempt above that. You'll get texts. And I recommend enabling transaction alerts if you haven't already." "I'll take the alerts," he said. "And the limit." He paused. "One more thing, if it's all right. I'd like a full printout of the last 2 months." She printed the pages, the paper warm in his hands. He brought them home, spread them on the dining table like maps. He didn't go to social media much, but he knew Natalie did. He had no interest in policing her life. Parenting is not a searchlight, he believed, but a porch light. Still, he typed her name into his browser the way a man knocks softly on a closed door. There she was, smiling in pictures with friends, the light hitting her hair in that precise way photographs invent. A dinner plate in one picture that matched the restaurant name on his statement. A shopping bag in another with the same boutique logo, perched beside a pair of shoes captioned, "For presentations." You know that feeling when you're literally walking taller. Comments below, hearts and fire emojis. Her friend Vanessa wrote, "Queen." Another, "Okay, but that bag." Natalie replied with a sparkle emoji and a joke about responsible splurging. He closed the laptop and folded his hands. Responsible splurging. It was a phrase like a sugar-coated pill, easy to swallow, hard to digest. He had no desire to humiliate her with screenshots or a lecture laced with words like evidence. He would leave the courtroom to lawyers. He would keep the kitchen a place for truth. He could hear her key in the lock that evening before the door opened. He knew her rhythm. She called out, "Hey, Dad." 3 syllables bright. "I made stew," he said, and in that way the day tucked itself in. They ate and he asked about her clients. She spoke of a brand campaign with triangles and teal, of metrics sliding up and to the right, of a boss who said, "Let's workshop that," when he meant no. She laughed and he laughed with her because laughter is a bridge and bridges are worth keeping. Later, when she was rinsing her bowl, he noticed the handbag on the chair. It was a deep brown leather, smooth as a promise. The metal hardware caught the kitchen light. It looked precisely like the price it had cost. "That new?" he asked, not unkindly. She hesitated a hair's breadth, the pause of a musician thinking about the next note. "It was on sale," she said, smiling as if that were the same as saying gift. "Ah," he said. He made no mention of sales taxes or how sales are not savings if the thing costs more than you would ever pay. He simply said, "It's beautiful leather." Touched the strap with 2 fingers gently and then he let it go. When she went to bed, he sat alone with the papers again. He wrote a second list on the legal pad, this time not of charges but of questions, and beside each he wrote the answer he hoped for. "Why did you use my card?" "I was scared to ask for help." "What did you think would happen?" "I thought I could fix it before you saw." "Do you know what interest is?" "Not enough to feel it." He slept poorly. Money worries do that even to men who have done the math. At 3 a.m., he woke and went to the kitchen where the clocks glow green like small lighthouses. He poured water and looked out the window at the black-blue yard. He allowed himself, for the first time, a sliver of anger, not at Natalie but at the world that told her the cost of something was only the number on the tag, not the hours of life behind it. He inhaled, exhaled, and laid the anger down. He would need his hands free for what came next. The next day he called the restaurant. "We don't give out details," the hostess said reasonably. He thanked her. He called the rideshare company and was met with a maze of automated choices. He hung up. He wasn't looking for a confession. He was looking for clarity inside himself. At lunch, he drove to Natalie's apartment with a container of stew, the kind of fatherly pretense that has covered 1,000 check-ins. She hugged him at the door, surprised and happy. He stepped inside and noticed, without obviously noticing, the newness of small things. A speaker still in its box on the counter. A pair of shoes on the rug with soles too clean to have walked the city. A folded receipt peeking from a shopping bag under the coffee table, branded with a logo he had copied onto his list. "Brought you leftovers," he said. "Linda used to say stew always tastes better the second day." "I miss her cooking," Natalie said softly, and for a moment the room filled with something older and deeper than handbags and statements. He set the container in her fridge and turned back to the living room. "This place looks," he searched for a word that didn't judge, "updated." She grinned and rolled her eyes. "Okay, yes, I've been nesting, but don't start, I used a discount code." She laughed, a sound he adored, the pure bell tone of the child she'd been lingering in the woman she'd become. He didn't start. He asked about work instead. She talked, and as she talked he noticed the spiral notebook on her coffee table open to a page titled Budget. He recognized the bones of numbers, rent, utilities, groceries, written in her neat printing, and then a column that simply read Other, larger than all the rest. It was not a reckless plan. It was a young plan. It did not yet understand that Other is where everything goes to hide. "Do you want any help with those?" he asked, nodding at the page. "I've got it," she said quickly, a hint of defensiveness she likely didn't intend. "I'm not a kid." "I know," he said, smiling. "That's why I asked." On his way out, she pressed the bag with the old receipt deeper under the table with her foot. He saw the movement and pretended not to. Parenting was so often the art of pretending not to see long enough for a child to see herself. That evening he sat at the table with a fountain pen he only used for serious letters. He wrote slowly, shaping each line as if he were building something that would hold weight. "Natalie," he wrote, then scratched out her name and began again. "Agreement between Raymond Pierce and Natalie Pierce, regarding the repayment of charges made on credit card ending in 4721. He didn't fill in amounts yet. He wanted the document to exist first, to breathe, to be a thing you could hold like a rail on a staircase. He wrote the purpose: to help teach responsible financial habits and ensure accountability, without damaging credit or dignity. He wrote the terms in plain English, not legalese. Total amount to be repaid in monthly installments, with a reasonable interest rate to reflect the cost of borrowing, calculated simply, with no hidden fees or penalties. Missed payments result in a conversation, not a punishment. Early repayment is encouraged and celebrated. He paused after celebrated and smiled, thinking how odd it was to celebrate the end of a burden you could have avoided by not lifting it in the first place. But that is so much of life. We lift what we should not, and then learn our strength by setting it down. He added a clause she would not expect. Raymond agrees to match the final month's payment dollar for dollar in a savings account in Natalie's name, provided all prior payments are on time. He wanted this to be a lesson, not a scar. He believed in consequences. He also believed in seeds. He folded the paper and slid it into a manila envelope with a piece of carbon paper behind it like the old days, so there would be 2 copies if the pen pressed hard enough. He placed the envelope in the drawer beside the cutlery. He could have hidden it. He chose not to. Accountability does not happen in secret. The next morning brought a text alert from the bank at 8:04 a.m. Attempted transaction, $1 $249.99 declined due to limit. He let out a breath, not because he was triumphant, but because somewhere in the city his daughter was experiencing the jolt of a boundary, clean, immediate, undeniable. A boundary is not a wall you build around someone. It is a fence you put around a garden you are trying to grow. At 8:06 a.m., his phone rang. Dad, Natalie's voice was tight. "Morning, honey. My card isn't working," she said, and he heard the way she phrased it, my card, not his. Credit does that to us. It makes other people's money feel like ours until it doesn't. "I mean the one I was using. I don't know why. It's working the way it should," he said gently. "It's protecting us from what we can't afford." Silence, then a sigh, short and sharp. "Can we talk tonight?" "I made lasagna," he said. "Come hungry." She didn't come hungry. She came armored. He recognized the look, chin a little higher, eyes too bright, sweater chosen for confidence. She set her handbag on the chair again as if it were a person taking a seat at the table. "I was going to tell you," she began, which is the way many truths enter a room they should have never left in the first place. "I had every intention of paying you back." "I know," he said. "That's why you will." She blinked. She had expected anger or drama or a tidy absolution. People expect extremes because they are easier to navigate than the slow road in the middle. "You're not going to cancel the card?" she asked. Or, she swallowed, or call the card company and say it was fraud. Was it fraud? He asked softly. She closed her mouth. Her lips pressed together, not defiant, just young. She looked at the table where he had laid a fresh cloth, the good plates, the forks placed neatly. She looked at her father's hands, which had built fences and fixed pipes and spooned medicine, and were now folded calmly in front of him. "I made a list," he said, sliding the legal pad toward her. "These are the charges, these are the dates, this is the total." He didn't slide the statement, he slid his handwriting. He wanted her to see his time on the page. Her eyes moved down the columns. She sat. She ran a thumb along the paper's edge, grounding herself in something that did not glow or vibrate or chirp. "I can pay some of it," she said. I thought," she stopped. "I thought I'd get that bonus sooner." "We all think the next thing will save us," he said. "But sometimes the only thing that saves us is the thing we do now." Her shoulders sank. For the first time since she walked in, she looked small. "I'm sorry," she said. It was not theatrical. It was a line a daughter says when her father's patience brings her to the truth like a gentle hand on the back. He stood, opened the drawer, and took out the envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "This is something we'll do together," he said. "Not the paying, I won't pay this for you, but the learning. We'll do that side by side." She looked wary. "What is it?" "An agreement," he said, "between us." He slid it closer. "You'll repay the amount. We'll set a monthly number that leaves you enough to live, but not enough to pretend this didn't happen. There's interest, not much. Enough to feel what borrowing costs. No tricks, no penalties. If you're late, we talk. We don't yell, we adjust. And when you make your last payment, I'll match it into a savings account so you have something to show for what you learned besides a memory of being in the hole." She stared at him. "You're charging me interest." "I am," he said. Because banks do, because the world does, because love that saves you from every consequence turns into a kind of neglect. I won't neglect you. She swallowed and the words came out small. I don't want you to think I'm a bad person. I don't, he said, and the forgiveness in those two words was so present it felt like air. I think you're a person who made choices like we all do, and you have a father who won't let those choices become your character. He waited. He let the moment be big enough to live in. She reached for the envelope and slid out the papers. She read the first page twice, the second 3 times. She looked up. "What's the interest rate?" she asked, practical now, perhaps embarrassed to hear the question sound as adult as it did. 5%, he said. "Simple interest. We'll calculate it together each month so you can watch it fall as the principal falls. That's how you learn to hate it properly." She almost laughed, almost. Then she nodded. "I can do 300 a month," she said. "Maybe 350 if I cut back." She tapped a fingernail on the table, rapid math behind her eyes. "Maybe 4. He pulled the legal pad back toward him, wrote $400/month next to the total, drew a box around it. 4, he said. 4 is good. 4 hurts a little. Hurt helps us remember. They ate lasagna at last, both a little quieter, both a little anchored. Afterward, he showed her how to set up an automatic transfer from her account to his on the 1st of each month. "Automation helps good decisions survive bad days," he said. They adjusted her budget, rent, utilities, groceries, savings, and a line that said "Debt Dad." She snorted at the label but kept it, perhaps because naming a thing correctly is the first step to mastering it. When she left, she hugged him longer than usual. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder, "for not making me feel small." "You made yourself smaller today," he said, pulling back to look at her. "That's humility. It makes room for growth." After the door clicked shut, he sat at the table and reread the agreement she had signed, her signature precise, the loops on her letters youthful and firm. He filed one copy in the kitchen drawer and carried the other to his room. On the dresser was a wooden box where he kept Linda's letters, the kind she used to tuck into his lunch pail, folded twice, lined with the fragrance of whatever lotion she had used. He slid the agreement in beneath those notes because he wanted the lesson to live next to love, not apart from it. At 6:02 a.m. the next morning his phone buzzed. Natalie had sent a picture, her notebook open, a budget revised, others split into proper categories, a coffee in a ceramic mug instead of a paper cup. First small change, she had typed. A minute later came a second text. "I think I'll sell the headphones. They're too pretty to keep me up at night." He smiled, alone in his kitchen, with the light coming in like a blessing. He poured his coffee and stood at the sink, the place where American men have stood for 100 years and measured both their failings and their blessings in the reflection of a window. The phone buzzed once more. "Also, do you know how to calculate simple interest? I want to understand it, not just pay it." He typed back, "Yes, we'll do it together tonight. Bring your calculator and your stubbornness." He put the phone down. He lifted the lasagna pan to wash, and as the water ran and the soap made small mountains of bubbles, he felt something unclench in him. The number on the page was still large. The road ahead still long, but the lesson had begun to walk on its own 2 legs, and that, he knew from a lifetime of raising things that needed time, was how anything worth keeping starts. The days that followed were full of numbers, not just on paper, but in the quiet arithmetic of daily life. Natalie woke up earlier than usual, not because an alarm insisted, but because her mind was restless. Where she once scrolled through online shops before work, She now sat at her kitchen table with her notebook open, pen in hand, staring at categories that suddenly mattered. Rent, groceries, transportation, utilities, debt, dad. Each word felt heavier than its ink suggested. She doodled little boxes beside the amounts and shaded them in as if coloring could make the burden prettier. Raymond, meanwhile, carried his own notebook, his yellow legal pad that had been with him through car repairs, tax seasons, and home projects. He had started a new page with Natalie's name at the top, not because he needed to track her every move, but because writing helped him see progress, even if progress was invisible to the eye. He recorded the $400 installment she had promised, penciling in the date of the first payment. Then he wrote a simple line beneath. Teaching is harder than paying, but it lasts longer. Still, not everything shifted overnight. Old habits linger like shadows at dusk. One evening, Raymond came home to find Natalie at the kitchen counter, laptop open, eyes glowing with the reflection of a clothing website. He watched quietly from the doorway. She scrolled, clicked, added something to a cart. The temptation of buy now, pay later blinked on her screen. For a moment, her face softened with longing. Then, as if she remembered his steady eyes, she clicked the X in the corner. The cart disappeared. She sighed, turned off the laptop, and poured herself a glass of water instead. Raymond said nothing. Sometimes silence is the applause no one hears, but temptation had already left its mark. When her next bank statement arrived, she saw small charges she had almost forgotten. A subscription here, a delivery fee there, late-night streaming rentals that added up. They weren't thousands. They weren't even hundreds. But they were small leaks in a boat already heavy with water. She sat at her table, staring at the total, and for the first time felt the pinch in her chest that her father had described. How even little debts have a way of multiplying, like weeds that grow in cracks if you don't pull them out early. She folded the statement and slid it into her purse. But the paper seemed to burn against her wallet, whispering of her mistakes every time she reached for her keys. That Saturday, over breakfast, Raymond noticed her fidgeting. She pushed her eggs around the plate, avoided his gaze. Finally, she set her fork down. "Dad, I think I owe more than we talked about." Raymond looked at her, not surprised. He had lived long enough to know that the first confession is rarely the whole truth. How much more? "Not a lot," she said quickly, as if speed could soften the weight. "Just a few little things, subscriptions, deliveries, stuff I forgot about." He leaned back, folded his arms. "Forgotten debt is the heaviest kind," he said softly, "because it sneaks up on you like a thief." Her eyes dropped. "I didn't mean to hide it." "I know," he said, "but you did mean to avoid it." She looked at him, eyes glassy. "I'm scared you'll think I'm irresponsible." "I don't need to think it," he said gently. "I just need you to face it. The truth doesn't go away because we shut our eyes. It waits until we open them." She swallowed, nodded. Then, as if surrendering something precious, she pulled the folded paper from her purse and slid it across the table. He opened it, scanned the numbers. A few hundred here, another 100 there. In total, nearly $800 more than what they had counted. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was real. He set the paper down. "This goes on the list," he said. "The same rules, 400 a month, interest, you'll pay it down. You'll breathe easier when it's gone." "But what if I can't keep up?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Then you adjust your life until you can," he answered. "Debt doesn't adjust to you. You adjust to it." She nodded slowly, the lesson sinking like a stone in water. That night she stayed in. Her friends texted pictures from a rooftop bar downtown, glasses raised, smiles wide. She looked at the photos, felt the familiar tug, and then glanced at her notebook on the counter. She typed back, "Can't tonight, saving up." There was a moment of silence in the group chat, then a reply, "Boring." Another, "Come on, Nat, YOLO." She smiled sadly, put the phone face down, and made tea instead. Meanwhile, Raymond sat in his recliner with a book open on his lap. He wasn't reading. He was listening to the quiet hum of a house where his daughter was learning what he had prayed she would learn, not from shame, not from punishment, but from responsibility. He thought of Linda, gone so many years now. He thought of the way she used to manage the checkbook with careful precision, writing each expense in her neat cursive, balancing down to the penny. She had been the one who taught him that money was not just currency but conversation. A conversation between who you were and who you wanted to be. Natalie was learning to join that conversation, slowly, stumbling, but learning. In the weeks that followed, the hidden bills became less frequent. The subscriptions were canceled, the delivery apps deleted from her phone. She started cooking more, asking her father for recipes. She even brought leftovers to work, something she had once sworn she would never do. Her coworkers teased her lightly, but she smiled and told them, "It's cheaper this way." Inside, she felt a small pride. She was building something invisible but solid, discipline. Raymond noticed the change but said little. Pride is best felt, not declared. Still, in the quiet moments when she wasn't looking, he allowed himself a smile, because the hidden bills were no longer hidden. They had been dragged into the light, where lessons always live. The night came like any other, or at least that's how it appeared on the surface. The kitchen smelled of rosemary and garlic. The table was set with the same old dishes Raymond and Linda had bought when they first married. Sturdy, plain, still intact after 4 decades. Raymond believed in using what lasts. Natalie, though, had always believed in new things, shinier things. She had teased him once, saying, "Dad, these plates could be in a museum. They are that old." He had smiled then, but tonight he thought of that comment differently. Museums keep what's valuable, even if people don't understand it at the time. He heard her footsteps before the door opened, the familiar clack of her heels on the porch. When Natalie stepped inside, she was still wearing her work clothes, a blouse the color of deep wine, a necklace that glimmered in the soft light. She set her handbag down in its usual place, and when she looked at her father, she smiled, but the smile was practiced. The kind you wear when you're hoping no one will look too closely. "Smells amazing," she said, peering into the pot on the stove. "Lasagna again." "Your mother's recipe," he said. His voice carried no judgment, only history. "Sit down, let's eat." They filled their plates. For a while the sounds were ordinary, forks against ceramic, the faint hum of the fridge, the crickets starting up outside. Conversation tiptoed around safe ground, her work, his tomatoes, a new neighbor down the street. But the envelope sat on the counter beside him, and it seemed to throb like a heartbeat, demanding attention. At last, Raymond set down his fork. He reached for the envelope, pulled out the pages, and laid them gently in front of his daughter. The sound of paper on wood was louder than any shout. Natalie's smile flickered, then collapsed. Her fork froze midair. "Dad," she whispered, as though saying less would soften the truth. He tapped the page once with his finger. "These are the charges, Natalie. I didn't want to talk about them until we were together here where it's just us. I want to understand." She looked down, the boutique name, the electronics store, the restaurants, every number a mirror reflecting her choices. Her cheeks flushed. She tried to summon a defense, but the words stuck. I was going to tell you," she stammered. "I just thought maybe I'd pay it back before you noticed." Raymond didn't raise his voice. He had learned long ago that yelling builds walls, not bridges. $12,000 doesn't stay hidden long, Natalie. His tone was calm, almost tender. That made it worse. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean, her voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't want to look poor in front of my friends. Everyone else has things, Dad. They travel, they go out, they buy what they want. I wanted to belong. There it was, the confession behind the charges. Not greed, but fear. Fear of being less. Fear of standing apart. Raymond leaned back, folded his hands. Do you know what belonging costs? She wiped at her eyes, frustrated. Apparently $12,000. He let the silence settle. Silence is where truth often grows. Your mother and I, he said slowly, we had one rule about money. If we couldn't pay for it twice, we didn't buy it once. Do you understand why? Natalie shook her head weakly. Because if you can't pay for it twice, then you can't afford it at all. Debt isn't buying. Debt is borrowing against your future self. And your future self deserves better than to wake up chained to your past mistakes. Her chin trembled. So what now? Are you going to pay it, call the bank, say it was fraud? He looked at her with eyes that were firm but never unkind. No, fraud is lying. Paying it myself would be pretending. Neither of those will help you. What will help is this. He slid the handwritten agreement across the table. The paper was thick, his pen stroke steady. At the top, her name stood beside his. Beneath the terms, monthly installments, simple interest, a promise, not a punishment. Natalie stared. Her mouth fell open slightly. You're making me sign a contract. I'm offering you the dignity of accountability, he said. I could have yelled, I could have taken the card and locked it away. But then you'd learn nothing except fear. This way you learn what debt really is. A weight, a cost, a responsibility. Her voice cracked. But you're my dad. And that's why I'm doing this, he answered gently. Because one day when I'm not here, the world won't care that you're someone's daughter. It will care whether you pay what you owe. And if you don't learn here at this table, then where will you learn? For a long moment, the kitchen was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then slowly, Natalie reached for the paper. Her hand shook. She read it line by line. Her eyes stopped at the last clause, his promise to match her final payment into savings. She looked up, tears blurring her vision. You do that for me, she whispered. I'd do more than that, he said. I'd teach you to never need saving again. Her lips pressed together. She picked up the pen. And in that small moment, with ink meeting paper, a new chapter in their story began. Not one of hidden bills and unspoken guilt, but of truth, discipline, and a lesson her father had waited a lifetime to teach. The contract sat in the center of the table for a long time after Natalie's pen lifted from the page. Raymond folded it carefully, the way a man might fold a flag or a love letter, and slipped it into the manila envelope. She sat across from him, arms crossed, staring at the wood grain as though it might open up and swallow her embarrassment whole. He stood, collected the plates, and rinsed them quietly. No lecture followed, no dramatic flourish, just the scrape of forks into the sink, the hiss of running water, the soft clink of ceramic against ceramic. Natalie almost wished he had yelled. It would have been easier to defend herself against anger than against his quiet steadiness. Later that evening, she retreated to her room, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept hearing the scratch of his fountain pen writing her name on that contract, the gentle certainty in his voice as he explained each clause. She thought about the handbags in her closet, the shoes lined up by her door, the receipts crumpled at the bottom of drawers. They didn't look like treasures anymore. They looked like weights. The next morning, Raymond left early as always, but taped to the fridge was a yellow sticky note in his neat, square handwriting. "First payment due in 2 weeks. We'll sit down tonight to plan. Love, Dad." Natalie stood there in her pajamas, hair uncombed, staring at those words. She felt the mix of irritation and gratitude only a child could feel toward a parent who cared too much. That night, she found him at the dining table, legal pad open, calculator beside it. He gestured for her to sit. "We'll start with your income," he said. "How much comes in each month after taxes?" She gave the number, cheeks hot as if confessing. "Good, now expenses. Rent, utilities, food, transportation, list them honestly." She began and he wrote each one down. When she hesitated, he glanced at her. "Subscriptions." She bit her lip. "I canceled most of them." "Most," he repeated, "not all." She nodded reluctantly. He wrote the number. By the time they were done, a slim line remained at the bottom of the page, just enough for the $400 payment. "It's tight," she said. "It's life," he replied. "Tight teaches you what matters. Loose makes you forget." For the first time, she understood why his shoes had been resoled instead of replaced, why his old car still rattled down the road. It wasn't stinginess, it was clarity. 2 weeks later, the transfer cleared, $400 into his account. She texted him afterward, "First payment done." He replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. She stared at it, strangely disappointed. Part of her wanted more praise, more softness. But another part realized the lack of fanfare was the point. Debt repayment wasn't a triumph. It was responsibility. The following month, she made the second payment. This time, she added a note, "Feels like nothing's changing." He called her that evening. "Check the balance," he said. She did. The number had dipped below 12,000 for the first time. It was still massive, but it was moving. "See that?" he asked. "That's momentum, small steps. Debt doesn't disappear in a blaze, it shrinks by inches, and if you keep at it, one day you'll look up and realize it's gone." Her chest loosened slightly, she almost smiled. Still, the lesson was hard. Friends invited her on a weekend trip to Miami. She declined. Co-workers ordered lunch out. She ate leftovers at her desk. Temptations whispered. But each time she thought of the contract in her father's drawer, her signature pressed deep into the paper, and she turned away. One night, though, she slipped. A flash sale online, a dress she swore she needed for work. The price seemed harmless, $89. But when the package arrived, she couldn't even bring herself to open it. She set it in her closet, still sealed, and felt the guilt crawl across her skin. That Saturday, she confessed, "Dad, I bought something I didn't need." He looked at her evenly, "Then return it." She stopped. "I thought you'd be mad." "I'm not mad," he said. "I'm your teacher, and good teachers don't punish, they correct." She blinked. "So that's it, I just return it." "Yes, and you learn the itch to spend fades faster than you think if you don't scratch it." She returned the dress. The money went back on her account. She felt lighter than she expected, as if she had returned not just the fabric but a piece of her old self. Month by month, the payments stacked. Each time, Raymond logged them on his yellow pad with the precision of an accountant, then closed the notebook and said nothing more. But Natalie began to notice changes in herself. She cooked more. She walked to work some days instead of driving. She brewed coffee at home instead of buying it. And somewhere between the third and fourth payment, she realized she was no longer afraid of numbers. It was the hardest lesson she had ever learned, harder than any exam, any promotion, any heartbreak. But with each payment, she was not just erasing debt. She was building something invisible, something stronger than handbags and dinners. She was building herself. The weight of debt is not only measured in numbers. It seeps into mornings, into decisions so small they seem trivial until they stack into a wall. Natalie began to feel it in the silence of her phone when she scrolled past advertisements, resisting the urge to click. She felt it in her stomach when she told friends she couldn't go out for drinks, making up excuses about being tired, though the truth sat heavier. She had a contract with her father, and the contract was with herself too. The first few months had been difficult, but in a way that still carried novelty, like a diet in its early stages. There was even a flicker of pride each time she made the transfer, $400 vanishing from her account but taking a small piece of the mountain with it. Yet by the 6th month, the rhythm dulled. Pride gave way to fatigue. The numbers shrank slowly, achingly slow, and the wait seemed endless. One evening she came home after a long day at work. The elevator in her building was broken, so she climbed 4 flights of stairs with grocery bags cutting into her hands. By the time she reached her apartment, she was sweating, tired, and irritated. She dropped the bags on the counter and slumped onto the couch. The TV remote beckoned, but she ignored it. She reached instead for her notebook, the one her father insisted she keep updated. Rent paid, utilities paid, groceries just bought, savings pitiful but present, debt dad still looming. She stared at the total, crossing out one figure and writing the new one below. For every payment she made, the line moved lower, but the shadow of interest lingered like a whisper in the room. You'll be here longer than you think. Tears prickled at the corners of her eyes. She shut the notebook and pushed it away, frustrated with her own exhaustion. She longed for the carefree spending of before, when a new bag or dinner out was a solution to every restless feeling. Now, even small pleasures carried the sour aftertaste of guilt. Her phone buzzed. A group chat lit up with photos. Friends at a rooftop bar again, glasses gleaming, laughter frozen in pixels. One message read, "Wish you were here, Nat." Another followed, "Life's too short to say no all the time." She stared at the screen until the light dimmed. Then she turned the phone over, face down on the couch cushion. Life is too short, she thought. But life is also too long when you spend it digging out of holes you made yourself. Later that week, she sat across from her father at their kitchen table. He had cooked chicken stew, his comfort dish. She ate slowly, her fork circling the bowl. He noticed her silence. "What's wrong, Nat?" he asked. She sighed, setting the fork down. "I feel like I'm drowning. Every month I pay, but the number hardly moves. It feels like I'll never be free." Raymond leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. His eyes were steady, calm, the way they always were when storms swirled inside her. "Debt teaches us 2 things," he said. "How heavy it is and how strong we are to carry it. The trick is to keep walking. A step feels small, but add enough of them and you've crossed a continent." "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "That's because strength doesn't feel like strength when you're in it. It feels like exhaustion. You only see it looking back." She blinked at him, trying to let the words sink in, but her chest still felt tight. I wish I hadn't done it. I wish I could go back." He nodded. "Regret is useful if it keeps you from repeating mistakes, but useless if it only weighs you down. Carry the lesson, not the shame." Natalie bit her lip. "How do you do it, Dad? How have you lived this long without falling into traps like this?" He smiled faintly. "Oh, I've fallen. I just learned to get up slower. When your mother was sick, there were months I didn't know how I'd pay the bills. I wanted to swipe the card and forget the world, but I remembered something she used to say. Money is loud when you spend it, but quiet when you save it. I wanted her quiet more than the noise." The room stilled. Natalie felt tears burn again, this time from a different place. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "I'm sorry, Dad, for everything." His fingers closed gently over hers. "Don't be sorry, be responsible, that's the difference." That night back in her apartment, she looked at her closet. The handbags lined up on the shelf no longer glowed with pride. They looked like mistakes she had been renting, not owning. One by one, she pulled them down, snapped photos, and listed them online for resale. Each sale hurt a little, like giving up pieces of herself, but with each transfer into her bank account, she felt lighter. A month later, she walked into the kitchen with a check in her hand. "Extra payment," she said, handing it to her father, "from selling things I don't need." Raymond unfolded the check, saw the amount, and raised his eyebrows. "That's no small number." "I'm tired of dragging this around," she said. "I want to walk faster." For the first time since the contract began, his face broke into a broad smile. "Now you sound like someone who understands interest." Natalie laughed through her tears. The weight hadn't disappeared, but she realized she had learned something vital. The weight of debt doesn't just measure what you owe, it measures who you are becoming in the process of paying it down. By autumn, the air carried that crispness that always made Natalie think of school starting, of fresh notebooks and sharpened pencils. But this season, the lessons weren't in classrooms. They were in her kitchen, her bank app, her own reflection. The contract with her father had reshaped her life in ways she hadn't expected. At first, it had felt like punishment, a leash on her freedom. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the leash began to feel like a lifeline. For the first time in her adult life, Natalie felt the ground under her feet. She noticed it one Saturday morning while cleaning. She had opened her closet, once a shrine to impulse spending, and realized it no longer overflowed. The handbags, the shoes, the unopened packages had mostly been sold or returned. In their place was space, clean and echoing. She stood there staring, and for the first time she didn't feel lack. She felt relief. That evening she sat across from her father at the same table where their contract had been signed. The envelope was still in his drawer, but it didn't loom over her anymore. It felt like an anchor, steadying, not dragging. "Dad," she began, hesitant, "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about the card, the debt, all of it." Raymond folded his hands, patient as always, and her throat tightened, but she pushed the words out. "I hated you at first, for making me sign that paper, for charging me interest, for treating me like I wasn't your daughter but some borrower. But now," she broke off, tears rising, "now I see it was the only way I was ever going to learn. You didn't humiliate me. You didn't cover for me. You made me face myself." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse and slid it across the table. "I wrote you something." Raymond unfolded it. His eyes scanned the handwritten lines. It wasn't a budget, not a bill. It was a letter. "Dad," it began, "I thought love meant saving me from consequences. But now I know love means giving me the chance to face them. I'm sorry for stealing your trust. I'm sorry for making you carry the weight of my mistakes. But I'm grateful because now I understand what money really is. It's not about things. It's about responsibility, about freedom, about respect. Thank you for teaching me the hard way because it's the only way I'll remember. I promise when this is over, I'll never put you or myself through this again." His eyes blurred before he finished the last line. He folded the letter carefully as he had folded the contract months ago, and placed it in the wooden box on his dresser beside Linda's old notes. When he returned to the table, Natalie was wiping her cheeks. "I've been applying for promotions," she admitted. "Not to buy more things, to pay faster, to stand taller, to prove to you and to me that I'm not the same girl who stole from you." Raymond reached across the table and covered her hand with his own. "You never needed to prove you were my daughter, but I'm proud you want to prove you're your own woman." She let out a shaky laugh. "That's the nicest way anyone's ever called me stubborn." They both laughed then, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth. It was the first time the debt didn't feel like a shadow between them. It felt like a bridge. In the weeks that followed, Natalie's change deepened. She picked up freelance work, stayed late at the office, even taught herself to cook instead of ordering in. She brought her father meals sometimes, and he'd tease her gently. "Too much salt, Nat." But he always finished every bite. And when she made an extra payment one month, slipping the check across the table without a word, Raymond didn't comment. He simply logged it in his yellow pad, then smiled at her as if to say, "I see you. I believe you. Keep going." Natalie walked out into the autumn night after that dinner, the leaves crunching under her shoes, and for the first time in years, she felt not like someone chasing an image, but like someone building a future. The weight was still there, yes, but it no longer crushed her. It shaped her. She whispered into the cool air, though no one was around to hear it, "I'm going to finish this. I'm going to finish this for him, and for me." And in that whisper was the change of heart her father had been waiting for all along. Winter had given way to spring by the time Natalie reached the end of her contract. The pear trees in the neighborhood had begun to bloom, white blossoms scattering along the sidewalks like confetti from some unseen parade. Raymond tended his garden, coaxing the soil awake, while Natalie counted the days until her final payment cleared. It had been nearly a year since the night she signed her name to the paper at her father's kitchen table. Nearly a year since the weight of $12,000 had wrapped around her like chains. The burden had changed her, at first dragging her down, later shaping her steps, and finally teaching her to walk straighter than before. That final week, she visited the bank in person. She wanted to feel the check in her hand, to slide it across the counter, to see the stamp mark it as received. The teller smiled politely, but Natalie felt as though she'd just completed a marathon. She folded her receipt carefully and drove straight to her father's house. Raymond was on the porch, as he always was in the evening, a mug of coffee cooling beside him. She walked up the steps and handed him the envelope without a word. He opened it slowly, pulled out the slip of paper, and looked at the number. "That's it?" he asked softly. "That's it," she said, her voice cracked. "The last payment." He stood, opened the screen door, and gestured her inside. They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where it had all begun. He reached for the manila envelope in the drawer and pulled out the contract. The paper was worn now, edges softened from being handled, the ink still steady. He placed her final receipt on top of it, then folded the stack and slid it back into the drawer. "Done," he said simply. Natalie swallowed hard. She had expected joy, relief, maybe tears, but what she felt was something deeper, peace. "Dad," she whispered, "thank you for making me carry it, for not bailing me out, for believing I could do it when I didn't believe it myself." Raymond studied her face for a moment, then reached into his pocket and set a folded check on the table. She frowned. "What's this?" "Open it," he said. She unfolded it. The amount matched her final payment, down to the dollar. "Dad," she began. He held up a hand. "The deal was if you finished, I'd match the last one. That money isn't for spending, it's for saving, for building, for proving to yourself that you can have money without letting it have you." Her eyes filled, tears spilling freely now. She shook her head. "I don't deserve this." "Of course you don't," he said gently, smiling. "That's why it's called grace, but you've earned the lesson, and that's worth more than money." She stood, walked around the table, and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment she was a child again, safe in his embrace. But when she pulled back, she knew she wasn't the same girl who had once stolen his card numbers for a shopping spree. She was someone different now, stronger, wiser, free. That night before leaving his house, she walked to the closet where her old handbags used to sit. Only one remained, her mother's, a worn leather satchel she had kept for sentimental reasons. She touched it gently, then whispered to herself, "This is enough." As she drove home under the street lights, her heart felt lighter than it had in years. The weight of debt was gone, but the lesson would stay forever. And that, dear friends, is the story of Raymond and Natalie, of a father who loved his daughter enough to let her face the consequences, and of a daughter who discovered that responsibility is the truest form of freedom. If this story touched you, please remember to subscribe to Family Shadows so more lessons like this can reach others. Thank you for listening and for walking alongside us through these tales of love, sacrifice, and redemption. We wish you health, peace, and happiness in your own families. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.